Hello one, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all, Caspa in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Genesis Ouwusu, the Struggler. Genesis Ouwusu is a Australian singer, songwriter, rapper, and this is his second studio album. His first one, which was the great debut album, Smiling with No Teeth, which I thought was a solid debut and had the thematics of two black dogs, which were the representation of the first one being depression and the second one being systematic racism. And Genesis Ouwusu is bringing us thematics and metaphors once again with the roach, which is our protagonist here. And the roach is supposed to symbolize humanity. And then you got the old man, which is God, where God represents uncontrollable forces, man-made disasters, and a system built that's supposed to improve the lives of humanity, but instead it's just making matters more dire. They are feeling imprisoned, and feels like humanity has just lost control. The roach has just lost control. And as much as I do love the debut, I think Genesis really nailed it here with pinning down concepts, with keeping us engaged with what he's saying, also sonically as well. I think the production on this is definitely more consistently better. And with the singles kicking ass like they did, I really had no doubts that this album was going to be fire. Where we got two teasers, one being Leaving the Light, which is actually the opener to this album, which is a quirky, exuberant synth punk banger with these shouted reverb group vocals and these spiraling synths. I love the reverb choral vocals, the colorful organs, and the falsetto harmonies from Genesis. It definitely sounds very much like Devo meets Nine Inch Nails. But Ouwusu is putting his own spin on it, his own flavor like we've known him to do, and he is just showing the pandemonium, the anarchic world that he is living in through this track, which I believe, based on the lyrics, is supposed to paint this picture of Judgment Day, of basically running for your life, which I feel the breathing and the franticness of the rhythms of the synths really capture that very well. And the second single, Tied Up, which is this funky, sexy synth funk bop with bright blaring guitar chords, swaying bass, and Genesis is throwing in these bars with this very sarcastic cadence to very extreme and nightmarish circumstances, with these groovy falsettos where the production sounds very celebratory, the vibe sounds very celebratory, but once you get into the lyrics, it's anything but, while he's basically showcasing his feelings of oppression and how he's trying to stay strong while being encased under this system, under this control, about constantly being screwed over, and expressing it with, again, these very clever bars. The words getting salty, that's the way that it goes. Sodom and Gomorrah, Vogue, strike a pose. And one thing I love about this album is how dancey and how exuberant a lot of these cuts are. And it's basically something you could like dance to, but also telling you a story at the same time. And as we get into the deep cuts of the beginning of the album, we get the introduction to the characters here, the metaphors, the themes, where we're introduced to the roach on like this synth goth style track. It's very nocturnal, very dismal. It sounds like The Cure just a little bit, with these glistening synths, colorful choral vocals, painting the picture of his mentality, the humanity's mentality, looking for life's purpose while also trying to survive in it under a capitalistic fascist system, which then we're introduced to the old man, who is perceived as God, which we see is the oppressive capitalistic system. And then later on in that track, the system is acknowledged as master, which is accompanied by these other words to it to let you know that this system is basically running things, but running it in a dictator-like way. Another thing I love about Genesis's music is how he's able to have this sonic vibe, but also have the lyrical themes differ immensely from what you're getting sonically. Like See Ya There sounds like a baby maker, but once you get deep into it, it gets pretty dark. Like, this is a very neo-soul slow burner with these gorgeous sensual falsetto vocals from Genesis over this dreamy neo-psych production with reverb strum guitars across this fat bass as he talks about searching for purpose and feeling confined and coming to the realization that the prediction of going to hell is pretty much inevitable. So even though this track is bright and, I guess, dreamy, it's definitely the nihilistic portion of the album. Things do get energetic again though, with the very hyped, spacey industrial synth cut Freak Boy, which has a super heavy, bassy production, very atmospheric style production when it comes to the chorus. Feels like I'm going into this vortex or this tunnel and I'm just being showered by like icy synths, where the Roach is strategizing how to get out of this hell that he's living in and not make the same mistake as others around him in his environment. And I love the theatrical melodies here. Roach, Roach, the Roach, the Roach. And also I love like the melodies like peppered in here, the la 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 la. I think one flaw this album does have though is it's not very adventurous sonically as I would have liked it to be. I think some tracks are weak in comparison to others on here. Notably when it comes to Going the Distance, I think some tracks do fail in that pocket. Like the song What Comes Will Come, where there are moments here where he's not really putting a spin on his influences and kind of just using them. Like there are moments of this track where he does sound like Cudi and the production does sound like Cudi. However, I do give it to it for sticking to the narrative, even if the narrative is kind of a sour note, and you do get sour notes on here. And it's basically trying to break you out of the ideology that even though you are a good person, bad things cannot occur in your life. Things just happen, and if they happen, they happen. There is no control over it, be it you a good person or a bad person. And that's not to say the album ends on a weak note. It definitely doesn't. Balthazar is this dirty post-punk rager with this driving, distorted reverb bass. It kind of sounds like Joy Division a little bit. And I love the falsetto melodies that come in here, the ooh, 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 ooh. And probably the catchiest hook on here. It wasn't for my alchemy. It burned me through. You don't like my alchemy. Well, I love you too. Where this fits the existential part of the album, where he is talking about breaking free. He is talking about rebelling against the old man, which is the system. And then you have the sweet, dreamy, harmonious closer, which honestly doesn't exactly leave on a positive note and doesn't exactly leave on a negative note either. I feel this is the part where he has just accepted what life is, and I suppose trying to make the best of it. But mostly the beauty here comes from the harmonies, it comes from the dreaminess of this, it comes from the fitting finality of this album. I do feel this is a good part of the album to end off on, being it so dreamy, being how gorgeous Genesis's vocals sound on this. It's bittersweet, but I do feel sonically that it fits the sequential flow of this album. So even though there are spots here where I do feel it paints itself into a corner, there's no denying that there are bangers on here. There's no denying that I do feel there is a solid flow when it comes to the consistency of the artistic quality that is on this album. And I do love how there are themes that contrast one another sonically. And a lot of memorable hooks on here. Not much in terms of duds. And I honestly think this is better than the debut, if I'm being honest. And I'm feeling a 4 black hearts out of 5 on this. The blackest of 4 out of 5 on this. But if you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And that's it. Caspa, Gothic Ghost, Genesis Ouwusu, The Struggler. Till we meet again.